الله أكبر حي على الصلاة الله أكبر.
I rise, giving the highest of praise to the great God Allah and the highest of honors to his holy prophet, Noble Jew Ali, Islam. I'd like to extend those honors to the forerunner, the harbinger, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, who did warn and stir up the nations. I extend those honors to the Moorish Science Temple of America, subordinate temple number 19 here in Atlanta, Georgia, the office of the Grand Sheikh, office of the Assistant Grand Sheikh, office of the Chairman, the entire Sheikh staff. Give honors to the noble vanguards who keep the peace, and I give honors to the ills and bays and the groves and the visitors that are with us this evening. Islam. There's an article by the Prophet Noble Jew Ali, which has it's been growing on me in the past several months, and I'm going to open with that and give a word to the Moors, and this will be a quick demonstration. So, Islam. What shall we call him by Noble Jew Ali? What shall we call him? If you have a Moorish literature pamphlet, it should be in there, and it's the first demonstration. So often our various journalists find trouble in selecting the proper name for the Moorish American. Some say Negro, others will brand him race man. Still another will call him Afro-American, and then some colored, dark American, coon, shine, the brethren, and your folks. It is indeed a hard matter to find something suitable for the various occasions where a title needs to be used. Is it these people have no proper name? Did they have a national name when first brought to these shores in the early part of the 17th century? If so, what was it? Did not the land from which they were forced have a name? It now appears a good idea for those whose duty it is to write for the various journals to find out what the national name of the forefathers of these people was. Also look into the history of the founders of civilization and see who they were and where they stood in the building of the present civilization. Probably 2 hours in an up-to-date library would serve to relieve the strain on our men of letters. I'm gonna repeat that sentence again because I'm gonna draw from a book. So probably 2 hours in an up-to-date library would serve to relieve the strain on our men of letters. Now, this was written back in the 20s. When the occasion presents itself for a title for these people, the matter of the various names given to these 22 million people with all colors of every race of the globe was an act of European psychology. They gave him a name, then defined it as something inferior to theirs. White they defined as a color of purity. Black, they say, represents everything evil, pardon self. The Negro, as they were called in this nation, have no nation to which they might look with pride. I'm gonna repeat that one. Listen to what the prophet said. The Negro, as they were called in this nation. Going forward, I think we should refer to our people. We should take a note from the prophet here, you know. Our people out in the streets, they're not black people. They're not Negroes. They're not colored.
Islam. Indeed, they're not.
Their history starts with the close of the Civil War, or more properly, with his being forced to serve someone else. Thus, he is separated from the illustrious history of his forefathers, who were the founders of the first civilization of the old world. This matter should be looked into with a hope of correcting it. Islam. As I've been growing as a Moorish American and becoming a better citizen, oftentimes I have to realize that you know, when I wake up and I look in the mirror, I was not always in this state. I was in a state of mental servitude at one time, you know, in my own mind, because I was never a Negro, black, or colored. Neither were any of you. That's what the prophet teaches us.
Speak on it. We're not. Speak on it.
So, but I was in a mental state at a time, as you know, most of us were. A mental state of servitude, a state of being Negro, a state of being black and colored. So, being in that state, you know, I don't know if the rest of the world realizes how it is to, in your 30s, begin to realize who you are and who your forefathers were. There's a sort of a shock that is associated with it, and it takes years to get over.
Yes, sir.
But I'm saying that because I have to thank the prophet and thank the great God Allah and remind myself of what the prophet has brought. You see, I wouldn't be wearing a fez if it weren't for the Holy Prophet Noble Drew Ali. I wouldn't be wearing a turban. I wouldn't be Anfield-El the Moor. I would just be Joseph Anfield, the Christian property. That's what Noble Drew Ali has done for me. I wouldn't know what to teach my children. You know, I'd left church before I met the prophet. So I was just kind of out there. If it weren't for the prophet Noble Drew Ali, I wouldn't think about how I'm treating my wife. I would just continue in folly and selfishness. You know, as Christians, we think we're doing something, right? I mean, I'm talking to me, and there's I am not speaking radical or agitating against the Christian church at all. I'm speaking from experience. And I started on something, and I went down the road, and I'm trying to get back to it. So, but the prophet saved my life. Noble Drew Ali saved my life. So, he's saying just 2 hours in an up-to-date library would serve to relieve the strain of our men of letters. It's 2 hours in an up-to-date library, and this is back in the 20s. So there is a book titled Morocco as It Is, written by Stephen Bonsall Jr., that I'll be drawing from. And he was writing an account of Sir Charles Ewan Smith's trip to Morocco. And I did a little bit on this a couple weeks ago, but I left out some things. So this is Charles Ewan Smith's, I guess, memoirs, or his account of what was going on in Morocco, or what they say Morocco is. And they're in a caravan, and he's just going to be speaking on one of the Moors that was a part of the caravan, named Boazza. Says Boazza, the only other of the muleteers we admitted to our family circle, entered my employ with the worst character in the world.
Who is that?
It says, he was a man of many vices, the Tangerine said. On his downward path, all right, so, you know, we all, I'm not going to say we all, I had a downward path. I mean, I was, you know, on a downward path. So this is talking about one of the Moors' downward paths here. On his downward path, he had, it was rumored, sinned against every commandment of the Decalogue.
Wow.
Decalogue, that's the 10 Commandments. He would have been a splendid object lesson for Sunday school teachers, this poor Boazza, who 10 years before had been the richest householder in Rabat. He then owned houses and many slaves, and was always dressed in rich, soft raiment with a Dalil or prayer book fastened to his waist by a slender cord. Now, Boazza wore rags. He's saying, well, now back then he was wealthy, rich. Now Boazza wore rags, and very few of them, and drew the smallest salary of any muleteer in Morocco. So he drove mules. He could not afford, listen to this, he could not afford a fez or a turban. So he wore a piece of rope tied around his temples as headgear.
Islam?
This brother's at the bottom. All right? He knows who he is. He has a nationality. He couldn't afford a fez or a turban. So he wore a piece of rope tied around his temples as headgear. This brother out in the public, out in the world, doing what he does as a muleteer, once being one of the richest brothers in the area. Now he's just a driver, hired driver, but he's still a Moor. So when I read this, I'm thinking in my mind, what did Noble Drew Ali bring? He brought something, for one thing, called nationality to us, which we had no sense of in the state of being Negroes, blacks, and coloreds. He brought us that quality of character which arises from the fact of one belonging to a nation or a state. Because obviously it was here. And this goes on to talk about how this brother Boazza was, it says he was the victim of the keef habit. So he liked to smoke. There's a Chief Keef or something. Now everybody's chiefing Keef. As a people, we may be on our downward trail. But this brother knew who he was, even in the midst of all that. So I want to move on to the next paragraph, because how does this apply to the Moorish Americans? 10 miles from Tangier or less, on the slopes of Bahrain, or the hill between two seas, we had our first boar hunt. The American Khalifa, and this was written in 1893. All right, just to put you in the mind of spending 2 hours in an up-to-date library. 10 miles from Tangier or less, on the slopes of Bahrain, or the hill between two seas, we had our first boar hunt. The American Khalifa had kindly accompanied us in the hope of giving us some good sport. He had sent out a servant the evening before to prepare the village of beaters for our coming. So when we arrived at the cactus hedge that surrounded their lowly straw-thatched huts, they were there awaiting us, and sent up wild shouts of delight on our arrival. The Moors are ardent sportsmen. While it is nowhere set down in the Quran that such will be the case, I am told that the preachers in the mosques never hesitate to promise the faithful plenty of boar hunting in paradise. Uh-oh. All right, so during luncheon, the Khalifa proposed a loyal toast of the Star-Spangled Banner. And this is kind of just building upon what the Grand Sheikh opened up with us not beating our brothers and sisters up, for the 4th of July activities. Imagine my surprise when the toast hardly out of his mouth, the hunters and the beaters, to the number of some 50 or 60 who were sitting about us waiting hungrily, shouted, "Hip, hip, hooray." The Moorish accent of their words made it all the more amusing. When I expressed my surprise to the Khalifa, he laughed and said, "Why shouldn't they shout for the Stars and Stripes? They are good Americans, as their fathers were before them." We are all American citizens here. Let's hold a political meeting.
Oh, wait. Watch out. Wow. Come on, read that again, bro.
They are good Americans as their fathers were before them. We are all American citizens here. Let's hold a political meeting. Well, I'm almost about to jump out of my, you know. Look what the prophet brought to us.
That's right.
This is 2 hours in an up-to-date library. He was telling you what to do. He was telling us what to do and where to go. Study yourselves. Moorish Americans, and it actually states in the next. It talks about the actual. It says Moorish Americans. I built on this a couple weeks ago, where the Swahi men and the Moorish Americans didn't get along, but the prophet tread the way. The path is clearly cut. We're all American citizens here. The prophet talks about in the divine warning by the prophet for the nations, he talks about the Constitution back in 1774. That starts our Constitution. Us, the Moorish Americans. We're American citizens. We don't have to beat up our brothers and sisters about what they're doing on the 4th. We have our own demonstration. We have our own measure. We have our own meaning of what it is to be an American citizen. Us being Moorish Americans, we're American citizens. We can wave our flags freely. We can wear our titles of ills and bays freely. So I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud to be a Moorish American.
As you should be.
As I should be. He says we're all American citizens, so they had their divine rights there. And he says, let's hold a political meeting. Haven't you read about how tough it was for Asiatics in politics back then? All the way up until 1865. But these Moors who were proud American citizens were holding political meetings. These are the brothers overseas who were working, muleteers, drivers, in a state of having to kind of be in servitude to make money. They weren't mental slaves, though. You have to do what you have to do to feed your family. We still have peoples who have to serve Europeans today and politicians and other things. But being a driver or whatever, in the service industry, that's a noble profession. I will say that, working at an airport. So they were in the mental state of holding political meetings. That's what you could do as a citizen when you have divine rights, able to cast ballots, able to send representation for your nation. So let's remember what the prophet brought to us. He said, you are who your forefathers were without a doubt or contradiction. So let's be proud. Let's be proud to be Moors. Let's be proud to be Americans. Because when you go out and hold your head high as an American and other nations look at you, they see that light. They see someone who knows his ancestors and who's not just waking up and is still in shock. That's my measure for the evening. Any questions? With that, I leave you as I came in peace.
حي على الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر حي على الصلاة